course, we start this with the breaking news that showed up probably about 15 minutes ago. Breaking news on 105 through the Fan is presented by BetQL. Smarter bets start with BetQL. Download the BetQL app or visit betql.com today. And like I mentioned, this from Adam Schefter of ESPN. Let's see if I can get this back in front of me and get this verbatim. Of course, he's the ESPN senior NFL insider. 15 minutes ago, tweeted this, and I'll read it verbatim. This just in. Dallas is not making a head coaching change, and Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy is returning for the 2024 season, per sources. Schefter went further to say Cowboys head coach Mike McCarthy is now heading into the last year of his contract, which is not unusual for this organization. Dallas allowed former head coach Jason Garrett to coach into the last year of his deal as well, which we were mentioning as we were talking in crosstalk there. Blake, your initial reaction to, learning that Jerry Jones is not going to make a move despite how it seemed like everybody around the sports world felt after an embarrassing performance in the wild card round at home versus the Green Bay Packers. Mike McCarthy remains head coach. What you feeling?
Life isn't fair. That's kind
Are
of
you
my
serious?
That's kind of my initial reaction, and I completely understand the financials of it and 1 year left on his deal and all that. And I honestly thought that Jerry got so embarrassed at his home place, sold out home playoff game, that he goes, there's no way I can run it back. Because sometimes you have to put, in my personal opinion, the numbers aside. No coach has ever gone 12 wins 3 times in a row, has gotten fired, but also no coach has done that and not made it to an NFC championship game or a championship game in either conference. So the fact that he hasn't done that, the fact that he just got embarrassed by a 7 seed who's never won a playoff game, and he decided to bring him back, or not technically bring him back, let him play out his contract, it's just kind of we're good enough. And it'll keep the Cowboys relevant. That's kind of my thought process. Yep.
There's so many thoughts racing through my head. You can always get all your thoughts out on the truckwreck.com text line, 877-881-1053. Again, 877-881-1053. Look, let's work this out together. So Mike McCarthy remains, I think, the way that game went. Let's ask this question, because I ultimately the thing I'm trying to get to is what changes this year, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's what everybody who watches this Cowboys team feels. What changes from this year to next year? Because as you mentioned, you had the pretty consistent regular season success of a 12-5 record over the last 3 seasons. We don't got to talk about 2020, right? We don't have to talk about that. Yep. But you have that, yes. You have the fairly consistent postseason letdown, even though not this past season you lost in the wild card round. The season prior, you won in the wild card round and then lost in the division round, of course, getting smacked by your bullies, the San Francisco 49ers. And so the question then becomes what changes? Because last year there was something to give you some level of hope, right? In that, all right, well, Mike McCarthy is taking over the offensive duties. And so maybe that is the change that is necessary to make this a serious organization or serious team on the field. And ultimately, nope, that was not it, because this was not just, I'm going to go back to this Green Bay Packers game. This was not just a loss, it was an embarrassment that you cannot just put at the feet of players.
Thank you.
An embarrassment that you cannot, in fact, you need to put at the feet of coaching staff, because you got embarrassed up and down because this feels almost a little too happy music. I apologize. But embarrassed in such a way because Joe Barry and Matt LaFleur, the defensive and offensive play callers, respectively, for the Packers, knew and understood your principles and your system so well that they counteracted it at every single move, right? They knew your next step and they beat you to it consistently over and over and over again, showing that you were stale, that you were predictable, and that you were ultimately beatable when it comes to coaching. And so what changes with this team now that Mike McCarthy remains the head coach of this team? Because I think we have an understanding that Dak Prescott's contract situation, all those things are put you in such a place where I don't know that you change. Also, just if you bring Mike McCarthy back, I think that is a tacit acknowledgement that we are trying to go for it in this space one more time. So what does change? What in your mind can change? What in your mind can get you to a place? And I know I don't need you to get into detail because I don't know how much detail you could possibly have, but like, is there anything you could grasp at that looks at okay, there is some upside to this decision of keeping him?
Man, I'm really having to put on my positive Polly hat here right now.
Yeah, and I understand, right? Like the tough part, I'm putting you in a tough place because I'm asking you to have some level of optimism, but maybe in a way, this is just the answer is there isn't, right? And we can go from there. But I'm just trying to, because again, I don't think this was about personnel. This loss, this was
that's my thing. When you watched that game, everyone that watched it, it felt like outside of those first two plays with DeMarcus Lawrence, and even I think the throw we got the sack and we had the Deron Bland pass interference, and they got a free first down. It felt like literally almost every rep we lost, especially on defense. It felt like as soon as a play was called, we were losing a rep. I mean, we had guys running 30 yards open, 40 yards open. At some point, it's not really just personnel. It wasn't like where they're running a go route and you're getting beat because you're not fast enough. They were outsmarting you and being wide open. I can name 15 different times. Or Aaron Jones goes untouched up the middle. And it's like, you knew that going into the game that Aaron Jones is going to kill you. And then you go in a dime package, a nickel package. Okay, we're going to give up the run and we should be better on the pass. No, we were even worse in the pass. Okay, on offense, we should get some new schemes going. We're going against a weak pass defense that has the middle of the field that's open. You don't go to it more than like 3 times in the game. Michael Gallup and Jake Ferguson are your featured receivers, which is great and all, but where was CD and Cooks? Where was the correct game plan to get them involved? So it felt like from a preparation point, from an offense, from a defense, from a special teams, they weren't prepared. And we'll get into other reasons why later in the show, but I think Reggie hit it right on the nail. It does not feel like the Dallas Cowboys were not talented enough to win that game, or they just missed 1 or 2 plays that are football, and that's why they lost the game. They look like they were not ready to play that football game. They look like their mentality was terrible. Me and Reg were talking about it before the game, the body language on the sideline. Pick whatever player you want. It looked bad throughout the game. At some point, it has to go on to coaching. And when that guy is Mike McCarthy, who has shown you, I mean, I could read you stats all day on why the Cowboys should have been in the NFC Championship, maybe even the Super Bowl. So they should have at least won that game. To not even be in that game for 5 minutes is insane. That falls on coaching. I think it goes on both the head coach and the defensive coordinator, who are both piss poor. So I don't know how you motivate your team with, hey, we're going to run it back with this guy that's let you down year after year. And especially, I don't think a big portion of the talent pool is going to change. So I don't know what to point to. And I wouldn't have picked Mike. I get it from a logistical point of view. If he's got 1 year left on his contract and going all in, but I'll be honest, I have no hope when it comes to Mike McCarthy being my head coach moving forward. I would have zero hope. He would have to win the Super Bowl for me to be like it was a good move. Literally anything else I'd feel like is a failure.
All right, let's go to Jared. Let's get to the heart of this, right? This news, and of course, if you're just joining us, the news is that Dallas is not going to make a head coaching change, right? The news is no news, right? In this instance, that Mike McCarthy will remain in place. He will play out the final year, or he's heading into the last year of his contract. I guess we don't know ultimately that they're not going to extend him, although that would be insane. Do you know what a slap in the face that would be? Of course, I'm talking about a hypothetical. I'm not suggesting that I have heard anything that would, like, don't lose your mind behind that one particular. But look, man, he is going into this final year. I imagine that he is going to be kind of that lame duck head coach in this way, and it's. As Jerry Jones, can you put yourself in Jerry Jones' mindset? Because I tell myself that I've gotten out of the business of trying to predict what Jerry Jones will do, because he constantly makes me feel stupid if I do. But like, what's got to be the thought process in order to do this? Is it just like, if you continue to put yourself in a successful or a somewhat successful circumstance where you're around the playoffs, eventually you win the games, right? Is that the thought process here? Because there is something to be said for the ways in which Mike McCarthy has guys in like the 6 days of the week that are not game day, right? The ways in which he manages a roster, the ways in which he takes care of the health of his players, those types of things, the messaging that he brings, right? There's something to be said for that. But what is ultimately the thought process? And is it as simple as, I do not want to pay another head coach? Because I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm not coming up with great answers, Blake.
The only thing that I can maybe put my finger on is Jerry's not getting any younger, and do I want to restart a whole new culture with a new head coach? Mike McCarthy knows the system. He's gotten me to the playoffs. We've been competitive every year, 12 wins, stat this, stat that, undefeated at home in 2 years. So I know we'll be in the conversation. I know the media will talk about me. I know the fans will talk about me. And that's kind of the only thing I can put my finger on because, I mean, we were kind of talking about in this pregame. I'm fine with us not being good or figuring out a way to kind of clean house and restart, whether that be head coach or whether it be coaching staff or personnel. And it just feels like Jerry's complacent with being just good enough. People are still going to show up to Cowboys games. People are still going to support this team. Every game's going to be sold out. Every suite's going to be sold out. People are going to be there supporting this team no matter what. And that's really, at the end of the day, what matters most, in my opinion, to Jerry. It's not what can I do to get the most offensive moving coach or get in front of the times and get this hot young defensive coordinator or this guy in the draft. And let me use a top draft pick for this. It's like, we'll be just good enough. We'll be just good enough. We'll make the playoffs. Will we win? Great. I'm sure he wants to win. I don't think he's purposely trying to lose. But he's just like, he's not putting all his eggs into that basket of championship, Super Bowl, or bust. It's selling tickets, players having their own brand, himself having his own brand. And I feel like you look at some of these other owners, and the only thing they care about is their team winning the Super Bowl. And I don't feel like that's Jerry's main ultimate focus, even though he might say it out loud. I don't truthfully believe that.
It'll be interesting to see how this continues to go because, again, Mike McCarthy will remain as the head coach of this team. Jerry Jones it seems like you'll have him coach out on this final year of his deal. Someone points to the idea on the truckwreck.com text line that the difference that will have to be the defense in some way. Obviously Dan Quinn is still, like, today he continued on with his, coaching, his coaching, what's the right word? Interviews.
Yeah,
Thank
interviews.
you. Interviews that he has for various head coaching jobs.
He's got a bunch. He got like 4 lined up this week.
Right. Considering that I think a lot of people coming into at least this game, even though like the last 6 weeks thereabouts, this defense has not been what it had been prior. Dan Quinn was the darling of this coaching staff, right? The people in that building love him, right? That's one of the things that matters when all the way down to the players. But his actual, his actual ability puts it in such where it's like, I wonder what that does for his coaching prospects. I imagine that he's still going to be well desired in some ways, and also I imagine for him, he might be more willing to take a job now because, look, there's only so many times that you could look around and say, no, I do not want a job. And even with, I guess McCarthy staying, right, there's the guarantee of another year, right? Like, there's not a guarantee. This is a guy who is embattled, at least when it comes to us on the outside talking about him, and Mike McCarthy. So there's not a guarantee he's here the year after, and there's no contractual guarantee there. I imagine that you probably lose your defensive coordinator this year. And Broadus brought up a great question. What good coordinator is going to sign up for that particular job of, I'm going to come in, have that type of pressure.
Yep, pressure, a lot of pressure.
And also probably not have a lot of runway.
You're 100% right.